If you're a regular on The Prepper Historian, go ahead and subscribe right now, because what you're about to hear isn't another recycled survival cliché. This is one of the most overlooked Cold War-era strategies that outperformed many classic shelters, yet almost nobody in the modern prepping community talks about it. For the next minute, stay with me, because understanding this one principle could shift the way you think about protection, concealment, and long-term survival. During the Cold War, governments, soldiers, and even civilians in frontier zones weren't just digging holes and throwing logs together. They were using a method grounded in physics, not folklore, something that proved so effective that many classified field manuals didn't declassify the details until decades later. It's a tactic that solves three of the biggest problems of shelter building: time, exposure, and visibility. And that trick is using thermal mass and earth coupling instead of traditional above-ground shelters. Why Cold War engineers favored ground-coupled survival over classic shelter building. During the height of the Cold War, the fear wasn't just bombs. It was fallout, thermal pulses, reconnaissance aircraft, and later satellite surveillance that could spot a shelter by its heat signature alone. Above-ground shelters, even well-built ones, left thermal footprints, structural outlines, and fresh disturbances in the terrain. Engineers quickly realized that the safest places were those that didn't advertise themselves. Instead of building something, they used what already existed, the stable, temperature-buffered soil beneath their feet. By coupling living space to the earth, they eliminated the biggest giveaway: heat contrast. This wasn't theory. NATO survival instructors repeatedly demonstrated that a shallow, earth-coupled dugout could maintain livable temperatures long after a wooden shelter froze over. Soviet manuals taught Spetsnaz units to avoid constructing shelters unless absolutely necessary, relying instead on earth temperature stabilization to remain unseen and warm. This is the principle that beats shelters. The ground becomes your insulation, your camouflage, and half your structure all at once. How thermal mass gives you warmth and camouflage without building anything obvious. So what does thermal mass actually do? Soil holds temperature. That means it doesn't swing wildly from day heat to night freeze. When you place your body inside an above-ground shelter, your warmth escapes through the walls and roof, glowing like a beacon to thermal optics. But when your living space is within an earthen cavity, that heat spreads slowly and evenly, creating little or no signature. During those Cold War field trials, operators were often found in just minutes if they used tents or improvised shacks. But, when they dug a body-length trench, lined it with natural materials, roofed it lightly, and covered it with soil, they could actually stay hidden for days. You don't need any spy-era technology to make this work. You just need to respect thermodynamics the way they did. Here's a practical example. Let's say you've got about 4 hours of daylight left and the temperature's dropping. Building a log and branch lean-to with insulation, well, that takes at least 2 hours if you're working alone. But carving a 2-foot-deep personal trench, laying down some spruce boughs, adding a low roof of branches, and then covering it with 6 inches of soil. That takes half the time, keeps you warmer, and drops your visibility to nearly zero. That, right there, is the Cold War advantage. Now, why do soil-coupled shelters survive disasters that crush traditional structures? Cold War civil defense wasn't just about hiding from satellites, it was about withstanding blast pressure and fallout too. Ground coupling gave them both. Earth absorbs shock far better than any wall of timber. Fallout binds to the uppermost soil layers, so even a shallow cover could drastically reduce radiation exposure. Records from both US and Soviet exercises show that small earth-covered positions offered surprising protection, even when the standing structures around them were destroyed. Here's a practical way to apply that today. If you live in an area prone to tornadoes, hurricanes or wildfires, a small, properly reinforced earth-coupled recess on your property can be a safer emergency space than many conventional storm shelters. It's not glamorous, but it works because it's physics, not architecture. How to build a Cold War-style earth-coupled shelter the way field agents actually did it. The Cold War trick wasn't about digging a bunker. It was about minimal disturbance with maximum thermal and concealment benefit. Here's how field manuals described it in practical steps. Start with a site that naturally depresses or sits behind terrain. The aim is to lower the visual profile before breaking ground. Dig a cavity just large enough for sitting or lying down. Oversized shelters defeated the purpose because they required more time, more heat, and more visibility. Once carved, engineers lined the base with brush or reeds to create insulation from ground moisture. The roof was always low, never higher than necessary, because height trapped warm air above the body instead of around it. The roof was made from whatever rigid material was available, fallen logs, debris, or even a poncho. The key was the final layer, several inches of soil. That soil layer acted as camouflage, insulation, and, in nuclear scenarios, radiation shielding. Anyone can replicate this. In fact, many modern wilderness instructors teach a similar trench shelter, but, few really emphasize why it works as effectively as it does. That understanding came straight out of Cold War doctrine. Why this method still beats many modern survival shelters. People today often rely on gear. The Cold War approach proved you don't need it. Earth doesn't burn, doesn't advertise itself, and doesn't collapse in a mild storm. It's the most abundant resource in any survival landscape, and its temperature stability gives you predictable results when everything else fluctuates. Take a real-world application. You're caught outdoors in winter with only a small pack. Instead of building a debris hut that demands massive energy when you're already losing heat, you use this Cold War technique. A 2-hour investment gives you warmth, concealment, windproofing, and structural safety. You might still build shelters in other situations, but when your priorities are speed, stealth, and survival, this wins every time. If you learned something new today, subscribe to The Prepper Historian and share this video with someone who appreciates real field-tested history.